The sun hung high in the sky, casting golden rays over the neatly trimmed lawns and freshly painted mailboxes of Maplewood Estates. It was the kind of neighborhood where everything looked perfect, almost too perfect. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional chirping of birds or the distant hum of a lawnmower. Families here prided themselves on keeping up appearances, following the unspoken rules that made this place feel like a postcard come to life. But beneath the surface of this idyllic setting, tensions simmered, waiting for a spark to set them off. Ethan Reeve had lived in Maplewood Estates his entire life. At 16, he was your typical teenager, curious, full of energy, and eager to carve out his own space in the world. His favorite way to unwind was skateboarding. There was something freeing about gliding across smooth pavement, feeling the wind rush past as he practiced new tricks. For Ethan, it wasn't just a hobby. It was his escape from the pressures of school, family expectations, and the monotony of suburban life. On this particular afternoon, Ethan decided to take advantage of the warm weather and head outside with his skateboard. He chose the cul-de-sac at the end of his street, a spot that was usually deserted and perfect for practicing ollies and kickflips. With headphones tucked into his ears, he lost himself in the rhythm of the music and the thrill of movement. Each successful trick brought a smile to his face, and for a while, nothing else mattered. What Ethan didn't know was that someone was watching him. Karen Thompson, a middle-aged woman with an obsession for order, sat perched by her living room window, sipping tea and scanning the street like a hawk. To Karen, the HOA rulebook was sacred scripture, and she considered herself its most devout follower. She'd earned a reputation among neighbors as the one who reported even the smallest infractions, like a flag being left out overnight or a car parked slightly askew. Some found her dedication admirable. Others thought she took things too far. Either way, no one dared cross her. As Karen peered through her curtains, her eyes landed on Ethan. Her lips pursed into a thin line. Skateboarding. In the cul-de-sac. That was against the rules. The HOA guidelines clearly stated that any activity deemed disruptive or unsafe was prohibited. Sure, Ethan wasn't causing trouble. He wasn't speeding down the road or disturbing anyone. But to Karen, the mere act of skateboarding was enough to warrant intervention. Rules were rules, after all, and if no one else would enforce them, then it was up to her. Karen grabbed her clipboard, slipped on her walking shoes, and marched outside, her jaw set with determination. As she approached Ethan, her mind raced with thoughts of how she'd handle this situation. Little did she know, her actions would soon spiral into something far bigger than either of them could have imagined. Meanwhile, Ethan remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. He was focused on landing a particularly tricky trick, completely oblivious to the fact that his peaceful afternoon was about to take a dramatic turn. Karen marched down the sidewalk with purpose, her clipboard clutched tightly in one hand like a warrior carrying a shield. Her perfectly coiffed hair bounced slightly with each step, and her lips were pressed into a firm line that could cut through steel. To Karen, this wasn't just about a teenager skateboarding. It was about principle. Rules existed for a reason, she believed, and if people started bending them, the entire fabric of Maplewood Estates would unravel. Chaos would reign. Children would run wild. Neighbors would stop trimming their hedges. It was unthinkable. Ethan, still lost in his world of music and motion, didn't notice Karen until she was practically standing over him. Startled, he pulled out his earbuds and looked up at her. "Can I help you?" he asked politely, though confusion flickered across his face. He'd seen Karen around the neighborhood before. Everyone had. But they'd never spoken directly. Something about her demeanor made him uneasy. "Do you have any idea what you're doing wrong?" Karen demanded, her voice sharp enough to slice through the quiet afternoon air. She planted her feet shoulder-width apart, as if preparing for battle. Her clipboard hovered menacingly near her chest, ready to strike, or perhaps just to reference the HOA rulebook she carried everywhere. Ethan blinked. No. What did I do?" "You're skateboarding," Karen declared, as though stating the obvious solved everything. This is a residential area. Skateboarding is prohibited under Section 4.2 of the HOA guidelines. It's disruptive, unsafe, and frankly disrespectful to your neighbors. Ethan frowned, trying to process what she was saying. Disruptive. I'm not bothering anyone. There's no one even here except me. That's beside the point, Karen snapped, her voice rising an octave. The rules are clear. You're breaking them. And when people break the rules, it affects everyone. Do you want this neighborhood to turn into some kind of free-for-all where anything goes? Ethan shifted uncomfortably, gripping the edge of his skateboard. I'm really sorry if I upset you, but I don't think I'm hurting anything. I'll be done in a few minutes, okay? No, it's not okay, Karen barked, taking a step closer. Her eyes narrowed into slits, and her hands tightened around the clipboard. You need to leave. Right now. Or else. Or else what? Ethan asked, his tone cautious but tinged with frustration. He didn't understand why she was making such a big deal out of something so small. All he wanted was to practice a few tricks before heading home for dinner. Karen hesitated for a moment, then reached into her oversized tote bag. With a dramatic flourish, she pulled out a small device, a taser, and held it up for Ethan to see. Or else I'll make sure you comply, she said, her voice dripping with self-righteous indignation. I won't tolerate lawlessness in my community. Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. Was she serious? A grown woman threatening a teenager with a taser because he was skateboarding. This had to be some kind of joke. But the look on Karen's face told him otherwise. She stood there, unwavering, her grip tightening around the weapon. By now, a few neighbors had begun to notice the commotion. Curtains twitched and front doors cracked open as curious residents peeked outside to see what all the yelling was about. Some recognized the tension immediately. It was Karen, after all, and decided to stay safely indoors. Others lingered cautiously, unsure whether to intervene or let the situation play out. Ethan glanced around, hoping someone might step in and defuse the situation. But no one did. The weight of the moment settled heavily on his shoulders. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong. Yet here he was, cornered by a woman who seemed more interested in enforcing rules than showing basic human decency. I'm leaving, Ethan muttered finally, picking up his skateboard. He didn't want to risk escalating things further. As much as he hated to admit it, Karen's threats felt real and scary. But Karen wasn't satisfied. She crossed her arms and glared at him. Good. And remember, next time you decide to break the rules, there will be consequences. As Ethan walked away, his mind raced. He couldn't believe what had just happened. Little did he, or Karen, know, this encounter was only the beginning of a much larger story that would soon rock the entire neighborhood. Ethan's attempt to leave the scene only fueled Karen's growing sense of self-righteousness. To her, his decision to walk away wasn't an act of de-escalation. It was defiance. In her mind, Ethan's polite retreat somehow confirmed that he thought he was above the rules, that he believed he could skate away from accountability. Her grip tightened on the taser, and her jaw clenched so hard it looked like it might crack. This wasn't just about a teenager skateboarding anymore. This was personal. You think you can just ignore me and walk off? Karen called after him, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. That's not how this works, young man. You don't get to decide what's acceptable behavior in my neighborhood. Ethan froze mid-step, his skateboard tucked under one arm. He turned back slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to frustration. I'm leaving, he said firmly, trying to keep his tone calm despite the knot forming in his stomach. I didn't do anything wrong, and I don't want any trouble. Karen's eyes narrowed into slits, her lips curling into a sneer. Oh, you're causing plenty of trouble, she shot back, taking a step closer. You're setting a bad example for everyone else. If I let you go without consequences, what message does that send? That anyone can break the rules and get away with it. The handful of neighbors who had gathered at a safe distance exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered nervously behind cupped hands, while others filmed the confrontation discreetly, their phones held up like shields. A few brave souls considered stepping in, but no one wanted to risk becoming Karen's next target. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to choke on. Ethan, feeling cornered and increasingly anxious, tried reasoning with her again. "Look, I'm sorry if I bothered you. I'll go home now, okay? Just, please put that thing away." He nodded toward the taser still clutched in Karen's hand, its presence casting a dark shadow over the otherwise sunny afternoon. But Karen wasn't listening. She'd already convinced herself that Ethan's refusal to grovel or admit wrongdoing was proof of his arrogance. Rules were sacred, and those who defied them deserved punishment. That was her unshakable belief. Without another word, she raised the taser and pressed the trigger. A loud crack echoed through the cul-de-sac as the electric current surged forward, striking Ethan squarely in the chest. His body jolted violently, muscles spasming uncontrollably as he collapsed to the ground with a thud. The skateboard slipped from his grasp and clattered against the pavement, rolling a few feet before coming to rest near Karen's pristine sneakers. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The murmurs of the crowd fell silent, replaced by collective gasps of shock. Neighbors who had been filming lowered their phones, momentarily stunned by what they'd just witnessed. Even Karen appeared taken aback by the sudden reality of her actions, though she quickly masked her surprise with indignation. "See, that's what happens when you refuse to follow the rules," she announced loudly, addressing the growing audience as much as Ethan. Her tone was triumphant, as if tasering a teenager was a perfectly reasonable response to a minor infraction. "Maybe next time, you'll think twice before breaking HOA guidelines." Ethan lay on the ground, dazed and struggling to catch his breath. Every muscle in his body felt like it had been wrung out, and his heart pounded furiously in his chest. Humiliation burned hotter than the lingering sting of the taser. He could hear whispers around him, some sympathetic, others judgmental, but all he wanted was to disappear. Slowly, he pushed himself into a sitting position, wincing as pain radiated through his limbs. A neighbor finally stepped forward, offering a hand to help him up. "Are you okay, kid?" the man asked gently, his face etched with concern. Ethan nodded weakly, though the answer was far from true. As Ethan stumbled to his feet, leaning heavily on the kind stranger for support, the gravity of the situation began to sink in for everyone present. What had started as a minor disagreement over skateboarding had spiraled into something far more serious and far more public. Phones buzzed with texts and social media updates as news of the incident spread like wildfire. By nightfall, the quiet suburb of Maplewood Estates would become the talk of the entire town. And Karen, she stood there, clipboard in hand, oblivious to the storm she had just unleashed, not just for herself, but for the entire community. By the time Ethan limped through the front door of his house, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a wave of exhaustion and embarrassment. His hands trembled slightly as he set his skateboard down in the corner, and every movement sent dull aches rippling through his body. He didn't want to talk about what had happened, not yet, but he knew it was inevitable. The moment his dad walked in, the truth would come out. Sheriff Marcus Reed arrived home later that evening, his uniform still bearing the wear and tear of a long day at work. As the head of law enforcement in their small town, Marcus was accustomed to dealing with chaos, but nothing could have prepared him for the scene that greeted him inside his own home. Ethan sat slumped on the couch, his face pale and drawn, while his mom hovered nearby, visibly shaken. The atmosphere was heavy, charged with unspoken tension. "What's going on?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but firm as he hung up his hat. Something about the way Ethan avoided eye contact told him this wasn't just another teenage mood swing. "It's Ethan," his wife began hesitantly, her voice trembling. Something happened today." Ethan sighed, knowing there was no way around it now. With halting words, he recounted the events of the afternoon, the confrontation with Karen, her threats, and finally, the taser. As he spoke, Marcus's expression shifted from concern to disbelief, then hardened into something far more dangerous: anger. But it wasn't the explosive kind. It was controlled, simmering beneath the surface like a storm waiting to break. "Let me get this straight," Marcus said slowly, his tone low and measured. "Karen Thompson pulled out a taser and used it on my son for skateboarding." Ethan nodded, too drained to elaborate further. Marcus ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. "Did anyone call the police? Did anyone stop her?" "No," Ethan admitted quietly. "Everyone just watched. I think they were scared of her." Marcus clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. He'd known Karen was difficult. Everyone in the neighborhood did. But this went beyond mere eccentricity. This was assault, plain and simple. And as sheriff, he couldn't let it slide. Not even for someone who lived on his street. Without another word, Marcus grabbed his keys and headed straight for Karen's house. When she opened the door, clipboard in hand, and a smug smile plastered across her face, Marcus cut her off before she could launch into one of her usual tirades. "We need to talk," he said firmly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. His presence filled the room, commanding authority in a way that left Karen momentarily speechless. "I assume you know why I'm here," Marcus continued, his voice steady but laced with steel. "You assaulted my son today. Care to explain yourself?" Karen blinked, clearly caught off guard by the sight of the sheriff standing in her living room. For once, her usual bravado faltered. Still, she quickly recovered, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "Your son was breaking HOA rules," she insisted, her voice rising defensively. "He refused to comply, even after I warned him. What was I supposed to do? Let him disrespect the community? You don't get to decide how to enforce the rules." Marcus shot back, his patience wearing thin. "That's not your job. You crossed a line when you pulled out a weapon and used it on a child. Do you realize how serious this is?" "He's not a child. He's a teenager," Karen protested, though her voice wavered under Marcus's piercing gaze. "And he needed to learn a lesson. Someone has to keep order around here." Marcus took a step closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over her. "Here's the lesson you're going to learn, Karen. Assault is a crime. Misuse of a weapon is a crime. And when you commit those crimes against a sheriff's son, or anyone else, you'll face consequences. Don't expect special treatment because we live in the same neighborhood." For the first time in years, Karen found herself at a loss for words. The weight of Marcus's authority pressed down on her, stripping away her sense of invincibility. She stammered a weak defense, but Marcus wasn't interested in excuses. He made it clear that charges would be filed, and that Karen's actions wouldn't go unpunished. As he turned to leave, Marcus paused at the doorway and glanced back at her. "Oh, and Karen, next time you feel the urge to enforce the rules, maybe try using your words instead of a weapon. It might save you a lot of trouble." With that, he stepped outside, leaving Karen standing alone in her perfectly decorated living room, the reality of her situation sinking in. Meanwhile, word of Marcus's visit spread quickly among the neighbors, sparking whispers and speculation. Karen's reign of terror had finally met its match, and the entire community would soon feel the ripple effects. By morning, the story of Karen Thompson tasering Ethan Reed had spread like wildfire, not just through Maplewood Estates, but across the entire town. Social media lit up with posts, memes, and hashtags. #TaserMom became a trending topic overnight, with screenshots of videos taken by neighbors flooding platforms like Twitter and Instagram. Some people joked about it, creating GIFs of Karen brandishing her clipboard like a weapon, while others expressed outrage over her actions. The local news station even picked up the story, airing an interview with Marcus Reed, who remained professional but firm in condemning the incident. Karen, once feared and revered as the HOA enforcer, found herself at the center of public ridicule. Memes depicted her holding a taser instead of a gavel, captioned with phrases like "justice serve" or "rules over reason." Neighbors who had previously tiptoed around her now openly mocked her behavior behind her back. Even her closest allies on the HOA board distanced themselves, issuing a formal statement that condemned her use of force and suspended her from all committee duties until further notice. For Ethan, the attention was overwhelming. While some classmates cheered him on, calling him a legend for surviving such an absurd situation, others whispered cruel comments about how he must have provoked Karen. Teachers offered words of support, but the constant buzz made it hard to focus in school. Every time he walked down the hallway, he felt eyes following him, judging him. At home, reporters called nonstop, asking for statements or interviews. Marcus politely declined on behalf of his family, shielding Ethan from the chaos as best he could. Meanwhile, legal proceedings moved forward. Marcus filed charges against Karen for assault and misuse of a weapon, ensuring the case received proper attention within the department. Despite their personal connection to the victim, he recused himself from directly handling the investigation, leaving it in the hands of trusted colleagues. The prosecutor assigned to the case promised a thorough review, emphasizing that no one, regardless of their position in the community, was above the law. As the days passed, cracks began to show in Karen's carefully constructed facade. Once confident and unshakable, she now avoided eye contact with neighbors during her rare outings. Her immaculate lawn went unmowed, and her usually spotless house fell into disarray. Rumors swirled about her mental state, with some speculating she'd always been unstable beneath her polished exterior. Others defended her, arguing that while her methods were extreme, she truly believed she was protecting the neighborhood. The tension reached its peak at the next HOA meeting, where tempers flared and old grievances surfaced. Dozens of residents attended, packing the small community center. One neighbor recounted how Karen had reported them for painting their front door a shade of blue not approved by the HOA. Another shared a story about her complaining when their dog barked too loudly. For years, these complaints had been brushed aside or ignored out of fear of retaliation. But now, emboldened by recent events, people spoke freely. Amidst the heated debate, a surprising voice rose above the noise. Ethan's. Encouraged by his parents, he decided to address the crowd, explaining how the incident had affected him. Standing nervously at the podium, he admitted feeling humiliated and powerless in the moment, but emphasized that he didn't hold a grudge against Karen personally. Instead, he urged the community to rethink its priorities. "Rules are important," Ethan said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "But so is kindness. We shouldn't let rules divide us or make us afraid to stand up for each other. If we can change that, maybe something good can come out of this." His speech earned applause, sparking conversations about revising HOA policies to focus less on punishment and more on fostering a sense of community. Several residents proposed forming a new committee dedicated to addressing concerns fairly and compassionately. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. While Karen remained largely absent from these discussions, her absence spoke volumes. The woman who had once ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist was now a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when rules overshadow humanity. And though the scars of the incident lingered, both for Ethan and the community, there was hope that Maplewood Estates could emerge stronger, wiser, and kinder than before. In the weeks that followed, Maplewood Estates underwent a transformation unlike anything its residents had ever experienced. The Tased incident, once a source of outrage and gossip, became a catalyst for deeper reflection within the community. Neighbors who had long lived side by side without truly connecting began to see each other in a new light. Conversations shifted from complaints about lawn height or mailbox colors to discussions about empathy, fairness, and how to create a more welcoming environment. Ethan's speech at the HOA meeting had struck a chord, especially among younger families who felt stifled by Karen's rigid enforcement of rules. Inspired by his courage, several parents banded together to form a community kindness committee. Their mission was simple: to prioritize relationships over regulations and foster a sense of belonging in the neighborhood. They organized potluck dinners, outdoor movie nights, and even a weekend skateboarding event, something Ethan never imagined would happen in his rule-obsessed suburb. At first, participation was slow. Some neighbors were hesitant, worried that stepping out of line might invite scrutiny from the remaining sticklers for order. But as more people joined in, the atmosphere began to change. Kids laughed as they raced down driveways on scooters, while adults swapped stories over cups of lemonade. For the first time in years, Maplewood Estates felt less like a gated fortress and more like a real community. Karen, however, remained largely absent during this period of healing. She stayed indoors, blinds drawn, avoiding eye contact whenever she ventured outside. Her suspension from the HOA board turned into a permanent removal after members unanimously voted to replace her with someone more level-headed. Though some whispered that she deserved worse, others quietly expressed concern for her well-being. Despite everything, she was still a neighbor, and many hoped she'd find a way to reintegrate herself into the community someday. For Ethan, life slowly returned to normal, though it was a different kind of normal than before. He received an apology letter from one of the neighbors who had filmed the taser incident but hadn't intervened. It read, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up when you needed help. Your bravery has inspired me to be better." That small gesture meant more to him than he expected, reinforcing his belief that positive change was possible, even in places where fear had once ruled. The revised HOA guidelines also marked a turning point. Gone were the nitpicky rules about holiday decorations staying up past January 15th or restrictions on children playing outside after sunset. In their place came policies focused on inclusivity and respect. A new dispute resolution process allowed neighbors to address concerns without resorting to threats or punishments. Even the dreaded clipboard-wielding patrols ceased altogether, replaced by friendly reminders posted on community bulletin boards. As summer approached, signs of progress were everywhere. Flower beds bloomed in vibrant colors, not because they were mandated by the HOA, but because residents took pride in beautifying shared spaces. Children rode bikes freely along sidewalks, no longer worried about being scolded for minor infractions. And Ethan, he finally got permission to build a mini skate ramp in his backyard, a project supported by nearly everyone on the block. Still, not all wounds healed overnight. Some neighbors admitted they'd been too afraid to stand up to Karen in the past, fearing retaliation or exclusion. These confessions sparked difficult but necessary conversations about power dynamics and accountability. Slowly, trust began to rebuild, brick by brick. By the end of the season, Maplewood Estates looked much the same on the surface. Neat lawns, tidy houses, and cheerful mailboxes. But beneath it all, something profound had shifted. What had once been a neighborhood governed by fear was now one driven by compassion. And though challenges lay ahead, the community faced them together, united by the lessons learned from a single unforgettable moment. Little did they know, the final chapter of this story was yet to unfold. For both Ethan and Karen. The legal proceedings against Karen Thompson concluded several months later, bringing a sense of closure to the neighborhood. In court, she pleaded no contest to misdemeanor charges of assault and misuse of a weapon. The judge sentenced her to probation and mandated anger management classes, along with community service hours at a local youth center. While some residents felt the punishment was too lenient, others believed it gave Karen a chance to reflect on her actions and make amends. Karen's public appearances grew rare after the trial. When she did venture outside, she kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with neighbors. Gone was the clipboard-wielding enforcer who once patrolled the streets. In her place stood a quieter, more subdued woman. Some neighbors whispered that she'd been humbled by the experience, while others speculated she was simply biding her time until the scandal faded from memory. Either way, Karen's influence over the community had diminished significantly. For Ethan, life moved forward in unexpected ways. The incident, though painful, became a defining moment in his young life. He discovered a passion for advocacy, using his experience to speak out about youth rights and the importance of standing up to bullies, even those wielding tasers. His story resonated with people far beyond Maplewood Estates, earning him invitations to local events and school assemblies where he encouraged others to find their voice. At home, Ethan's relationship with his dad deepened as they worked through the aftermath together. Marcus, proud of how his son handled the situation, made sure to spend more quality time with him, whether it was helping him build the mini skate ramp or attending one of his skateboarding competitions. Ethan even earned second place in a regional tournament, a victory celebrated by the entire neighborhood. Meanwhile, Maplewood Estates continued its journey toward becoming a kinder, more inclusive community. The revamped HOA policies gained recognition in local newspapers, inspiring other neighborhoods to follow suit. The Community Kindness Committee thrived, organizing projects like planting trees along the main road and hosting workshops on conflict resolution. Even Karen's old role as an enforcer was reimagined into something positive. Volunteer mediators now helped resolve disputes before they escalated. One crisp autumn afternoon, the neighborhood gathered for its annual fall festival, a tradition revived after years of neglect. Booths lined the park, offering pumpkin painting, caramel apples, and live music. Ethan stood near the skateboarding demonstration area, teaching younger kids basic tricks while parents cheered them on. It was a stark contrast to the tense cul-de-sac confrontation that had started it all. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm hues across the sky, Karen appeared at the edge of the crowd. She lingered hesitantly, unsure if she'd be welcome. Spotting her, Marcus approached with a polite nod. "You're here," he said simply, his tone neutral but not unkind. "I thought, maybe I should try," Karen replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced around at the smiling faces, the laughter, the sense of belonging she'd once dismissed as unnecessary. For the first time in months, she looked less like the rigid rule-keeper and more like someone searching for redemption. Marcus gestured toward the food stalls. "Come on, there's plenty of cider and pie left." Karen hesitated, then nodded. As she joined the festivities, a few neighbors greeted her cautiously, their expressions softening when they saw her vulnerability. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. By the end of the evening, as fireworks lit up the night sky, Maplewood Estates felt whole again. The scars of the past hadn't disappeared entirely, but they served as reminders of how far the community had come. Ethan watched the sparks dance overhead, feeling grateful for the lessons learned and the connections forged. In the end, what began as a clash between a teenager and a self-appointed authority figure evolved into something much greater, a testament to resilience, growth, and the power of coming together. And though challenges would inevitably arise in the future, Maplewood Estates faced them with newfound unity, a bond strengthened by shared struggles and triumphs.